Bring it on!
Lessons learned in combat. First lesson, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. This has been true of every single mission that I've been on. Right from the get-go, you're going to be met by tons of artillery, tons of drones, other teams getting exfilled from the same vehicle that you are infilling from. A lot of times we didn't have a plan for when the generator goes down. We only brought one. So when the generator does go down, do you have a backup source? Do you know where another team is that has a generator that can then charge your batteries? And that only takes one FPV drone dropping one $10 VOG and your day could be ruined. Or a week. Make sure you trust everybody in your team. This is something that I think is a lot easier when you're in the actual military. When I was in the Marine Corps, it was a lot easier to understand these people because I'd been with them for months. I'd been through boot camp and SOI and everything. But in the foreign volunteering that I've been doing, it is very difficult to find a group of people that you can trust with the very minimal amount of time that you can spend with these guys working up to a mission because you're already on a deployment. So make sure you know what their background is, their mentality, what makes them tick, what they fear, all of that. It should be figured out way before you get to the front. Humor is hand in hand with morale. Broadly speaking, morale is the most important thing in war. Think of the Russian warship go f yourself guy. Right before he had said that, he said, oh, I guess this is it, you know, and he was having some humor with the people that he was with. On the first day of the invasion, he didn't know this war was going to go for 3 years. Everybody thought it was going to be 2 weeks. Well, he still had some fun with it, and that's really important in battle. I've seen this so many times, and you can see in a lot of my combat videos, some of the funniest times are in the middle of combat. That's the only way that I found personally, and I know for all my friends out there, to keep our nerves down. Have some humor with it, understand that, yeah, this is war, but it doesn't mean that you can't have a fun time in your last moments. And more likely than not, it's not gonna be your last moment. Enjoy it, and there's gonna be more times that you're gonna be in the front line after that. The last thing you want is to be shell-shocked. This is something that happened to me on my first mission in Ukraine. Wow, not a fun time. Humor would have helped a lot. 90% of casualties will begin and end with a drone. This is something that I knew as a drone operator in Ukraine as well as a FPV engineer. In every war that I've been in, no matter the enemy, our first contact was always a drone. Either as reconnaissance, calling in artillery, mortar fire, jets, or a drone drop, kamikaze drones. When I was in the Marine Corps, we didn't take camouflage seriously at all. We thought, okay, that was only for the recce dudes or the scout snipers. Well, no, it is everybody's individual task. Make sure your camouflage is up to speed. Make sure you're okay with thermal. Do you have an umbrella with you? Do you have some way to go and conceal yourself from the drone above your head, which will happen no matter what enemy it is. ISIS, China, Russia, anybody. And you should always be scanning for cover, which is something you should be doing in a patrol anyway. But make sure you look overhead. Do I have overhead concealment? Is there a bunker nearby that I can get some cover from? Because as soon as that drone finds you, you'll be taking large amounts of fire immediately, within the minute. And also with drones, train marksmanship. I was able to shoot one down. I know plenty of people who've been able to shoot these things down, FPVs or Mavics. Before you go on a mission, make sure your gun is sighted in and it functions well. You are going to be asked to do a job that you were not trained in, that is not your specialty. Make sure to cross-train. Make sure to ask the Pogues what their job is and how can you learn something in a day, in a week. Electrical problems, you're gonna have them if you're living in a bunker. How do you change a tire on a 7-ton? I hope you know how to do that before you leave because your driver was just hit by artillery, the A driver's killed, and you're in the back of that thing with all of your gear and you need to get out of there with that essential gear. And obviously you should know how to use every weapon system. If a javelin gunner gets injured, who's gonna take out that tank? Well, I hope you had that training. I hope you spent the 5 minutes it takes to learn how to use a clue. Don't chase combat. I think this is something that I found myself especially guilty of in the early days. And I know a lot of friends who chased it as well who didn't have that experience and they wanted it. Any combat that's worth getting into is going to be handed to you on a silver platter. You will be able to go on that mission. Take your time to train. Take your time to go and get your mind right, get everything right beforehand. There's plenty of stuff you could do in the meantime. Don't chase it. It's going to come if it's worthwhile. Trust me on this. War is not over. War is only going to be exponentially increasing. This stuff happening around the world. We have tons of things that are about to light up and hold your horses. Take your time to train. The time will come. When you're in combat, staying alive is the top priority. It is not killing the enemy. It is not anything. To survive is to win, because that's the most difficult part. It is very easy to get killed in Ukraine. If you have your flashlight on for 5 minutes outside in the dark in Ukraine, on the front line, within 2 kilometers of the front, you will be killed. You will die. Everybody in your squad who's next to you will die as well. You will be targeted. Being the best CQB dancer is not going to save you most of the time. 90% of your combat will be shooting down drones that are trying to launch artillery at you. That is 90% of the time. Seek cover, reaction artillery. Hey, that's the next one. Subterranean is your only friend. The only time that the Russians would shell us is when they have visual on us with a drone and they know we are out and about. So as soon as we run inside our bunker, which might even only have like 1 layer of logs and a little bit of dirt on top, might be able to stop a 60. It doesn't matter. They stop the bombardment within a couple minutes, probably about 5 minutes. they'll stop because it's not worth it. How many rounds do you want to waste on this one little tiny bunker with 3 drone operators? Not more than 20 usually. 20 is usually the cutoff. The next one, I'm going to get a little in depth, but just want to kind of talk about it since this is the reality I've seen in the front line, and I know this is the reality of it. If you can break through the first 3 lines of the enemy's defense, it will usually turn into classic maneuver warfare as you train for day in, day out in the military. But breaking through those first 3 lines of defense is going to be incredibly difficult, and you should expect a lot of casualties. And as soon as you break through, the enemy's pre-made defensive positions start to dwindle, and on top of that, when you get closer to them and overwhelm them, they're going to have to leave a lot of their gear and run out of their hole back to their lines with everything that they can carry on their backs, which quickly turns into an absolute rout as they try and save themselves. But this is with a caveat. This only works for like the first 2-3 months of the war. After that, all the positions are going to be built way ahead of time, even 20 kilometers deep. Russia learned that during the Kherson-Kharkiv offensives back in 2022, you'd be dishonest if you thought that all the countries are not watching what's happening in Ukraine and how Russia was not able to defeat Ukraine after 3 years. So the whole breaking through the first 3 lines of defense and all that, it's only going to work for maybe the first couple months. After that, it's going to be slow getting. All right, it's going to be very difficult, especially with barrier troops. That's the next one. Barrier troops are a part of the Russian military. This is how the Russians are able to keep on their meat assaults, especially the North Koreans. You see them in Kursk. 30,000 casualties on the Russian side in the last 6 months that Ukraine has been in Kursk. But that's a ridiculous amount of people, and that's all because they have barrier troops, and they've had this since the start of the war. They had it back in World War II. They keep troops in the back, paid to shoot the soldiers that are running back from the front line because they're scared, and it works. Next one, always give the enemy the opportunity to surrender. That part that I talked about earlier only works in the first stage of whatever war you're in. After a couple months, the enemy's going to have barrier troops behind to shoot them in the chest if they run back. So this means that they're going to be more battle hardened at this stage in the war, as well as hopeless of their survival, no matter what. If you're coming or they have to run back, they're going to die. They're going to be hopeless, and you can't make them into a cornered rat. They have to be okay with surrendering. So you always have to leave room for them to give up. Give up and we'll treat you well, we'll bring you back, and hey, we'll take care of you. And that goes into one of the final points. Propaganda. Propaganda is a part of life. This is something that you are exposed to on the daily from different organizations, whether it's politics, war, you're constantly being told one side of the story. So, with a channel like mine, where I share combat footage, everything's recorded. Everything. You have a drone constantly watching you. Everything you do is recorded both by video as well as audio. GoPros, phones from you or the enemy, drones. If you do one slip up, something that's bad, they will be given that video and they will think, I'm not going to surrender anymore. Think about 10 years from now, if China is going against the US, all right, we're in a big war, and there's one video of one Chinese soldier out of like 2 million of them, but there's one of them who beheads an American soldier. Well, all the Americans would think, oh, well, I don't want to be surrendering to those guys. And this happened in Ukraine when we were dealing with Chechens at the start of the war. There's Chechens in our AO, and we were a little terrified of them because we knew that they would be doing that stuff. And they kind of pride themselves in their viciousness and not surrendering. And our thing with that was no surrender. You can't surrender. I mean, none of us were planning to. I mean, we're internationals. If we get caught by them, they're just going to kill us anyway. But again, this is all propaganda. You got to make sure to win the propaganda war. You don't have to respect the enemy, but you have to treat them well. Treat them well. They're going to go back, tell their comrades. You don't want to ruin anything for anybody else. If there's one video that comes out that's bad that you do, and the enemy sees it, they're then going to tell everybody, and when they capture one of your friends, they're going to get killed. They're going to be tortured. All these things are going to happen to them as retribution. Very difficult to say. It's war, but you got to be on the right side of history. The unexpected is the only thing you should expect. Fog of war. I've recently seen training videos from OPFOR training units in the Army, and their job is to act as a near-peer threat. And it's really clear to me when I'm watching these videos that people have a hard time dealing with the chaotic nature of technology not working, or not knowing if you're hit or the enemy is hit. It's kind of like when I was playing airsoft or paintball. Yeah, you hit somebody and they're like, oh, I didn't feel it, or, they don't call their hits. It's rage-inducing. Just know that combat is the same. That's going to happen the same way that it happens in training. There's going to be times where you think you hit something and it didn't, or they think they hit you, or technology goes down, or whatever it is. So the question then is, how do you perform after that? Are you just going to yell and, oh my god, I hate this, and are you going to freak out, or are you going to start getting scared and kind of hunker down like, oh my god, these guys aren't even playing by the rules? No, you got to play into it. You got to be able to react to the unexpected. Things like that are going to happen. The ranges that I went to in the Marine Corps, and probably the ones that you go to when you're in the military, is they're preset, all right? They have a specific route that you go down, and they have a certain thing that you have to do, and you do dry runs, a couple dry runs before you do the live run. So you already know what to expect. That's not the reality, okay? That's not the reality. The places that you're going to go aren't going to look anything like it did on the map because everything's smoldered down, all the rubble's on the ground, and it just looks like flattened concrete with a couple trees that are half destroyed by artillery. So if you're in the military right now, think about that first company-sized assault that you guys did on a range. The first time you ran through it, that's what it's gonna feel like. It's not like a Call of Duty map where you know all the different angles. It's completely new all the time. That's the fog of war. How are you gonna deal with that? You need to be able to think on your feet. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. Educate yourselves in the tactical questions that your leadership makes. You should know how to do the job of at least the person right above your pay grade. Ask yourself, what will you do when it's just 3 of you and your team leader goes to run off and find the squad leader or something? What are you gonna do when a BMP rolls up 50 meters away when you thought you were 2 kilometers behind the front line? Radios are gonna be jammed. Leadership is gonna be targeted and sometimes eliminated. Reaction to contact, reaction to IDF, and reaction to drone drills can only take you so far. You need to know how to plan. You need to know how to be an NCO. You need to know how to have initiative. Nobody else has been in that area before. You're completely new to it. You're on a recon patrol and it turns into a combat. This happens. This has happened. How are you gonna deal with it? A couple minutes of wasted time will get everybody killed. What do soldiers do? What do I do? When I was really confused in a combat setting, I freaking find my leader and I get up to him like, what's going on? I find we get closer and more. That's just asking for a drone drop, a big juicy target. And the only way to not be that is to have initiative and say, hey, we're going here. We're going here. We're going to this basement. Make a plan there. And once you get outside, you better have that initiative to go through with that assault or whatever you have to plan. Believe it or not, the leadership that you have don't always know the right answer. They're gonna need time to think. For many of them, this is also gonna be the first time in contact. So you gotta train yourself to make decisions, have initiative. I remember one of the ways that we did it in the Marine Corps was my sergeant would sit us down in a classroom and he'd say, hey, bring out your notebooks. He'd draw something on the whiteboard, a little map, and say, here's the enemy, here's you, what are you doing? And we had to do it in 2 minutes. We had no training in this. This isn't something they teach you as a private in the Marine Corps or Lance Corporal. But he wanted to see us take initiative because when he goes down, he's going to go down. Who's going to carry on with the mission? Who's going to be able to survive and take care of everybody around them instead of just waiting for that drone to drop something on you? Or Camouflage. Just an FYI, those drones that I'm speaking about, $3,000 and they have a thermal camera that can go 10 kilometers. The days of being able to hide and sneak your way into a position over 2 days, it's gone. You were going to be observed. Sometimes kamikaze drones, we had one of them in Ukraine, we had a thermal camera, it was $300. So that would make it about maybe $800 for a bombing thermal FPV. I don't know. It's ridiculous. So always consider, what is the concealment above me? What is the cover above me? Think about yourself. Do you have anything shiny? All the basics. It just takes one person with a flashlight at nighttime to get everybody killed. It just takes one person with Face ID, not turned off on their phone, and they turn on their phone in the middle of patrol. That Face ID is gonna beam you up like you're a Christmas tree, and everybody in your squad gets killed because you have Face ID on your phone. You didn't think, oh shoot, I forgot, just make it passcode. I hope you guys learned something. There's a lot of things, a lot of lessons to be learned, and I might make another video like this in the future, but these are the top ones off the top of my mind. So thanks for listening. That's about it. Peace.